Yeah, the sink that had been in there since 1950 is no longer. But yeah, just things to make it a little bit more functional. But yeah, always improving with Airbnbs.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Creating Cash Flow, where today we have an interview with Zach and Amy, who are the hosts of Two Short-Term Rentals. We talk about what it takes to make a great listing, what it takes to get 5-star reviews, and some of the biggest pros and cons of owning not one, but two short-term rentals. I hope you guys enjoy today's show. And with that being said, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you can be notified every time we release a new video. So a special thank you to Zach and Amy for coming on the show today. And before we jump into the interview, I want to share with you guys their listings on Airbnb so that you can take note on how they create their listings and what their properties look like. So this is Zach and Amy's profile on Airbnb, and you can see that they are super hosts with 89 total reviews. That is between their two homes. They have a cabin, which is a much bigger home, and then they have what they call the little house, which is a cottage. Both are in Ludlow, Vermont. So let's kind of look at these. So I personally have stayed at this Airbnb right here at the little house, and it was amazing. We absolutely loved it. We went in the fall, and so it wasn't this green. It was a million different colors of leaves that were yellow, red, and orange, and just amazing. And the leaves were all over the grass and the roof, and it was amazing. So you can kind of dive in here and see it's a very small home. It's a typical Vermont home. Obviously it gets a ton of snow in the winter, and it's right next to a ski resort. So there will be a lot of skiing, a lot of people that want to go there during the winter. So I love that they're showing pictures of the snow. Just like diving in, it's just a great residence in Ludlow, Vermont. You can see this is one thing that I loved were these wooden beams that kind of span the cross of the ceiling. Coming in here, you see it's very simple, it's clean, the pictures here they really represent exactly what you get once you get there. Washer and dryer in the unit, a cool little fireplace with some beautiful windows that look out into like a big spacious grass field right before all of the trees start up again. And as they will mention to get started, and I think we already mentioned, there's an updated kitchen here, which is really, really great. But I stayed at this property and I loved it. A property I don't know as well is this property here, which is the log cabin, but it looks amazing. You can see these windows and the views, and the balcony and the porch here are just really, really cool. This one seems to have a similar vibe of the other one, which is, I guess classic Ludlow, classic Vermont, where there's a lot of wood and it's very, very pretty. You can see here, this has a ton of open space, and which I think is probably pretty rare in Vermont, but solar panels, which is awesome because they're actually able to get sunlight there. A lot of the homes, there's so many trees in Vermont that I imagine solar panels are difficult on most homes, but that seems like a great source of renewable energy. And another picture that I wanted to show off was this one, which is amazing. Just the skies are so clear, the air is so clean, and I feel like this picture just says a lot about how beautiful Vermont is. And being from New York City, with Vermont, like this home only a few hour drive from where I am right now, this picture is amazing because this is exactly what I would be looking for when I'm thinking, hey, I want to get out of the city. I just want to go breathe some fresh air. I don't want to be around anybody, and I want to be able to see the sky. This picture really is amazing. So also quickly looking at the reviews here, there's 29 reviews on this property, and they have 5 stars. Both of their homes have 5-star reviews. The other home, actually every single one of these is 5 stars, except value is 4.9 here, 4.9 on cleanliness. Everything is just 5 stars, which is something that they will talk about later. And they try and make their listing match as closely as possible what guests are actually going to experience so that they can get these 5-star reviews. So those are the two properties in Ludlow, Vermont on Airbnb, and I can speak from personal experience. They are incredible hosts, and the little house here It was just perfect. My wife and I stayed there for a week or so, and it was quiet, it was beautiful, and exactly a great escape if you are also in the market for a place to get out of the city. And with that, let's jump to the interview.
Hello there.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Doing so good. Thank you for meeting. And I just started the recording, just so you guys know. But I appreciate you guys jumping on, making time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to do it.
Just to get started, why don't we do quick intros and just tell us about yourselves and then how you got into the short-term rental space.
So Zach Smith and Amy Smith, we're both from Ludlow, which is where we have the short-term rentals. We bought our first house in Ludlow in 2016, I think it was. And we had actually done some short-term renting at our primary home, which was in Boston at the time. We had lived in Boston for 10 years, and that was what was our introduction to the short-term rental game and Airbnb, and that was where we got started. But then we bought the house in Ludlow, and then we bought a second home in Ludlow a couple years after, as we were kind of starting to figure things out. But we're both have standard 9-to-5 jobs as well, but we do this as a side hustle, and we got into it initially, I mean, because we wanted to have a house in Ludlow because we were coming up to go skiing on the weekends, and we wanted to have a place to stay, but to pay the mortgage and taxes and insurance, we wanted to supplement our income with some Airbnb income, and it worked out well to get us kind of going. But
yeah, when we first started Airbnb, it was in Boston, and that was because it was our first home that we had ever purchased ourselves. And we had done a bit of traveling, mostly internationally, and we had stayed at Airbnbs there. And so we were kind of excited when we bought our first home that we had the ability to do this, to be able to make some of that money back. So that was kind of our introduction to it. And then once we primarily did it when we were in Boston, when we would go on trips. So it was the early days of Airbnb too. So it was a little bit sketchier than it is now. And so we would go away internationally for like a week or 2 weeks, and we would Airbnb for that period of time. And so that was kind of our introduction to it. But like at the time, my closet was full of my clothes, and they were just staying there with access to my closet and all of our things. And we would kind of like move everything into the basement, anything that we didn't want stolen, and just kind of let it ride. And it worked out pretty well. We had some minor mishaps, which happy to share. But then when we found ourselves going back up to Vermont most weekends, because we were really just living in the city to work. We were spending every weekend driving to the mountains to go skiing or hiking or whatever. And so we realized that we could maybe do this there too, and without, having to get huge promotions to be able to afford it, by offsetting the income through Airbnb or short-term rentals.
So are you guys do you have your place in Boston still? Or
so we ended up deciding that the city life really didn't make sense permanently. So for a little while, we were actually living at the cabin, which is actually across the street from, we have 2 short-term rentals in Ludlow. And we were living there kind of. Pre-pandemic, we went and we were out in Colorado for a while, and we just did an Airbnb. We stayed there for a few months. And then the next year we were out in Tahoe for 6 months, and it was actually through Airbnb there as well. Mm-hmm. And during those periods of time, we would rent out our rentals. So we sold the place in Boston, had 2 rentals, and we're a bit nomadic pre-pandemic, and then for the majority of COVID. And we now have a primary home further up north in Vermont, about halfway between Stowe and Sugarbush.
Very cool. And then I guess my first question is, both of you have full-time jobs. How much time do you guys have to put into your short-term rentals? And I guess a follow-up question to that is, do you have a property management company that helps out, or like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of upfront time that you have to spend to get like the house itself Airbnb ready, getting kind of all the descriptions done, and then all the communication that you do to get somebody in the door and try to, get your pricing right. So that like getting up and running does take like a certain amount of time capital. And once you're humming a little bit, then it does still require some time, but that goes down quite a bit. I mean, it certainly depends on sometimes it's really hardly any time at all. And then other times, something will come up and you need to be available. I mean, Amy just had to jump down to Ludlow, which is about a 2-hour drive last week, kind of unexpectedly, because we were having some work done and somebody needed to be there in person. And that's why it is nice. And it's been really helpful for us to have always kind of been within driving distance to our short-term rentals, or certainly if it was even closer than that, that would be even better. But sometimes you do need to be there kind of in person, or have somebody that you really trust to be there in person. But as a general time commitment, I mean, I don't know how to describe that. I mean,
Yeah, I'd say that in the beginning, there's certainly a significant amount of time. But now that it's operationalized, I would say it's probably like a couple hours a week. And that includes everything. So Zach manages all of the financial everything. So all of the utilities and things like that, managing contractors when that needs to happen. And I work with our cleaner to make sure that we don't have a property management company. I can mention more about that. But I work with our cleaner to make sure that we're stocked on everything. Any purchases that we need to make for the home, I take care of that. And then we both do the communicating. So we try to make sure responses are really important on things like Airbnb. So we both, whoever sees it first, we have the same account linked to both of our phones. We respond as quickly as possible. So I would say maybe a couple hours in general.
Yeah, I would say tops. Like on a week-to-week basis, I think, a couple of hours would be probably a busy week. But overall,
And well, it also depends on how many Airbnbs you're doing in a week, right? If you have a longer term one, there's really only communication at the beginning and end unless there are issues. But if you're doing if you have a bunch of 2-night stays, it certainly could be upwards of that.
And we have friends who have like a duplex and they rent out the other side on Airbnb, and they do their own cleaning. So that's obviously going to require a significant more of a time commitment than we do. But we have a good cleaner, so that helps a lot. Also, say that's very important to the whole setup is to have good help, whether it's a cleaner or handyman or something like that. But we don't have a property manager, I think.
Yeah. So we're really lucky that we have someone that we really, really trust to do all the cleaning. And honestly, they end up acting as a de facto property manager in some ways because they're really your eyes on the property. So they let us know when things are low, but also there's a stain on the carpet. Do they let you know about that? This thing was dented. You need to replace this. So that's incredibly important. We also have someone that does the outside work. So someone that comes and picks up the garbage and will plow and will make sure the leaves are cleared in the fall. So you really do need both of those people, if not a property management service. We did look at Vacasa. As soon as you buy a rental property, reaches out to you and wants to be your property manager, but they take a significant portion of the profit. And it also, in my experience staying in Vacasa places and also knowing other folks that rent through Vacasa, it makes it pretty sterile. So it can be a really wonderful thing. And I think that if you don't have access to someone that you really trust to do those other two functions, Vacasa is a great option. But they bring their own bedding in and they have their own service for certain things that makes it feel a little bit more like a rental than like a home.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think, excuse me, sorry. One thing, Zach, that you said that I was going to go back to is you said like, it's a lot of upfront work and like creating the listing and all of that. I was just curious if you have thoughts on what makes a good listing on Airbnb.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to defer to Amy because she did a lot of work on the actual descriptions. And I mean, I think it is kind of to her last point, it's about not making it feel like every other listing. There are so many companies out there that are doing this as, professional property managers now that there's kind of like templates, it almost seems like, that are being used across many listings. So to make yours stand out, you want to make it feel like our brand is, cozy, homey cabin or, ski house kind of thing. And So we're trying to, make that come through in our listing, but also very important to be really honest about what you're providing, because you want to manage it. You want to get people in the door, of course, but you also want to manage expectations so that someone doesn't walk in and say, oh, I thought this was going to be a lot different than it is. And, so you want to have that kind of, proper management.
Yeah. Yeah, I think absolutely. It's about transparency. You want to be really clear in what you're offering. So, for example, in our second home, the one that you stayed in, when we first bought it, it had not been touched since 1950. So it was wall-to-wall carpet, and it was, as much as there is 1950s charm, like there was 1950s dust and 1950s cobwebs. Like it was kind of nasty. So we did the best that we could in a short period of time before we were going to be gone for the winter to clean it up the best that we could, pulled out of the carpet, all of those types of things. But it was rustic at best. And so we were really clear about that. I think in the listing, I put like, this is your grandma's cabin. And that's what you should expect. And if you're looking for frills and, high-end stuff, you won't find it here. And people may think like, oh, that's probably a really silly idea in terms of getting people in the door. But the last thing that you want with Airbnb, especially if it's a new listing, is unhappy customers. So if anything, I probably undersell, over deliver as a general rule.
Yeah. And like, it's funny with that listing too, how it's changed over time as we've kind of updated things, and it will again, because we've just did the kitchen, but like originally it was that, and then we made some updates and kind of, and the pricing changes along with that. So that first winter, I mean, we were budgeting ourselves at the lower end of the spectrum for, ski houses in the area. But as time goes up, you kind of change that to go along with what you're offering, because your product is changing. So that's been, we kind of every year, every time we do something significant, go and take a look back over things and adjust, things here.
And look at the market, because it's changed so much, especially through COVID in a ski area. So we look at pricing. I would say that we probably haven't adjusted our prices as much as others, but for us, it is a side hustle. It is not, a lot of people through this, they've become full-time property managers, and that's really what they're setting out to do. So they want to get top dollar. That isn't maybe as much of a priority for us as making sure that we're bringing in people, consistent people that we trust, not just anyone, right? As far as the clientele.
Yeah, we want to make sure that that you're not going to have the parties, right, and things that are going to be detrimental to the house itself.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point too. And something that we have changed is that when we started, we kind of thought that the more beds, the better. And so we had, I think we had one of the houses listed for like 8 people, and 8 people could fit in there. But if 8 people were in there, one, you were kind of on top of each other, and 2, you were probably hosting a bachelor party or something of the nature. Yep. And we realized that our house is actually it was more suited towards a small family. So even though you probably could have 8 people, we wanted there to be 6 max. And we noticed that really changed the dynamic of who was renting. It went from large groups of friends, right, from what they were telling us, to a family with a couple of kids. Yeah. And we really didn't have to adjust the price point too much for that.
That's awesome. And how do you guys determine because when I went to your guys' place, it was amazing. And it was like your grandma's cabin, but it wasn't horrible. Obviously you guys had already done some great work. Like it was really like charming, I guess would be the word. And then you told me that you revamped the kitchen, and I was like, well, the kitchen was kind of like, it had those super old wooden drawers and they're like hard to open, and like they didn't close easy, but it was like part of, it's like what you expected from the listing. So you guys did a great job there. How do you determine, hey, it's time to revamp something, in this case, the kitchen?
Yeah. So in this case for the kitchen, I would say it was out of necessity. So we did the best that we could, but coming out of the last season, we realized that there were probably some ancient plumbing issues that needed to eventually be addressed. And there are some things that you're never, like with a really old kitchen, in particular, kitchen and bathrooms, you're never going to get them quite clean enough. because it's just been there for too long. And so we always knew that we were going to need to update the kitchen. It was a matter of, we did want to wait and sit with it for a couple of seasons after we bought the place to figure out exactly what that should look like. But we realized that it was a function over form that needed to be adjusted. So that was why we did that. We definitely we've kept all of the wood paneling in the walls and things like that, where the charm is aesthetic, but where it's functional and we needed to make adjustments, we've made them. So the other example is we had all of the pans and things were in a basket, but they were literally sitting on the floor because that's the way it was built in 1950. And we realized that to make it more comfortable for folks, we wanted to have a more functional kitchen. So I think that's really where that decision was rooted in.
Yeah, no, that was something we had, kind of targeted for a long time. It's just, it's a significant expense. So we wanted to wait until the right time. And it's also not the easiest thing to get help to, have a contractor. So in a small town, so little things. And when you can get the time, we took it kind of in the shoulder season to make that improvement. But for both of our properties, a theme for us over the last few years has been to try as quickly as we can to get to a place where there's not consistent extra maintenance that you wouldn't, normally expect on a home that's in good shape. So trying to improve it to a point where, we feel good about it, and there's always going to be something to do, but you don't want to have, like, it goes back to the time commitment piece. If you can get things to be at a certain level, like with our other house, I feel like we got there kind of last year. And this year, after the kitchen is done, I feel like we'll be there with this house. So the commitment level from a maintenance perspective is going down over time as we get on top of things, rather than waiting till something breaks and then having to fix it while you've got a renter there and trying to find that same contractor who isn't available. So that's, we've had things break over, time, and we've kind of learned our lesson to try to get in front of these things. It's an investment, in these properties are ours as well. So it's, you put the money into it, sure, and that's, cash flow out, but from an appreciation standpoint or from a value standpoint, you get that down the road as well. So it's not something you feel bad about. It just kind of needs to be done at some point. So
yeah, that makes sense. How do you manage it financially, though? Are you like putting 10% of each rental to the side for capital expenditures like this? Or how do you think about just the managing of it financially, where you're like, how much money you want to put into the home over the course of a year and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a separate checking and savings account for the rentals, and we put both rental properties, the revenue goes into those accounts and all the expenses comes out of those accounts for both of them. And we just kind of, have an operating account that we use for, utilities and the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and that sort of thing. And then there's a savings account. And, once the checking accounts gets filled up, just like your personal checking and savings account, you kind of move money over to the savings. And if you have every year at the beginning, I would say we have done the Airbnb through the winter, and then come spring, when it's our mud season in Vermont and not that many people are wanting to come up here during that time, we kind of take a look at our savings account. Okay, this is what we've got in here, and these are the things we want to get done. What's realistic to do this year? We can't do everything all at once. So we kind of chip away at that list. For us, it's not a full-time job. We don't have like a percentage. We're not, we don't have the Excel spreadsheet written out that detailed, but it's just a matter of, okay, we want to get this done this year. We don't want to draw it all the way down to zero, because you want to have some savings there in case of an unexpected expense. So we're going to do this, that, and the other thing for this year. And we'll save everything else until next year. So it's not too formulaic, but it's, what needs to be done. I think both of us have a clock in our head on certain things that, we want to get done sooner rather than later. And the kitchen was one of them. So, that got done this year. We know we want to do the stain at the cabin next year, because, again, these things, you just don't want to get behind. That's going to create a larger expense for you down the road.
Yeah. We also don't intend to we intend to keep both homes for a long time, which gives us a slightly different perspective on it. We aren't necessarily trying to make a bunch of improvements and then sell it for a short-term gain. So for us, we view it as a longer-term picture in terms of making the investments over time.
How did you make that decision to think about it more long-term rather than, because I've heard, and I don't know the details, so I don't know how to speak to it, but, oh, it's great to own a home for 4 to 6 years and then you try and sell it off. So I don't know if you guys weighed that out or how you decided to say, hey, this is just a long-term property that we love, we want, and it's ours.
Yeah, I can speak to why we would keep it, and Zach can probably explain better the 4 to 6 years and that kind of whole thing. But I think for us, both of these homes have personal value to us. They're homes that have they're in close proximity to our families and things like that. So for that reason, I think that we would probably hold on to them. And they're in a town that we grew up in, right, in an area that we view as, we view positively. So I think that for that reason, we would probably try to hold on to them. But that's really more personal than it is pragmatic. But I don't know if you want to speak to that timing piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, you can make the argument that it'd be great to sell right now. I mean, we just had in Vermont, in a lot of places in the last few years, there's been a significant run up in appreciation through the pandemic, and Vermont was one of those places that definitely benefited from that. But, if we sell them, then what are you going to do with that money? I mean, we can put that into equities, or do we have another investment? There's tax consequences to think about that. But the reality is these properties work well for us. We have the kind of infrastructure built up now with people to help, for the cleaning and for plowing. Like we know how these properties work. We're familiar with them. We kind of have done the maintenance to get them to a point where things are kind of always getting just a little, each year has been a little bit easier. And now they're both dedicated rentals. And this was the first year that we had it like that, which was, it really was a profitable year for us. So we have no intention on selling it, at this time. And we're taking a longer term view. But I think if the right investment opportunity came up, we could look into selling them. We're not totally tied to them like that, but it just, we don't have an exit strategy at this point that, we're waiting on. So we're just getting them to a good spot. We want them to be low maintenance, low time commitment, and just provide us that, extra income. And that's how it worked this year. And we'll just kind of try to make that process a little bit more efficient each year, I think.
We also candidly have a 15-month-old. So getting the places to a place where it is more passive and things can kind of run on their own is really important to us right now. I think we all have different seasons of life where we're able to invest more time in it. And for us, that was the last few years, and probably the time horizon for the next few years is a little bit different.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I love that. And it sounds like you guys use the properties yourselves, right? Still, or because to go out and go skiing, or are you not using it so much?
So right now, we're actually doing kind of a dual strategy where we are Airbnb-ing it from April 15th through the spring and summer. And then in the winter, we're actually doing long-term rentals. So in Vermont, it's really typical, and probably a lot of ski areas in general, to have a 6-month lease for seasonal rentals. And again, partly in the interest of our own time, but also because we can pass through utility costs. We are doing seasonal rentals with just one family for this winter. And so we won't have access to the house at all. And then in the spring and summer, if we do want to be there and spend some time there, we can, and we can just block off weeks in that way.
But it's evolved over time. I mean, when we were in Boston, we wanted the house for our own, selfish purposes to come up and, do ski weekends all year. And we were, kind of sick of having to stay in the guest bedroom at Amy's parents' house. And the opportunity presented itself, and we could kind of make it work from the actual purchase standpoint. And we were like, we'll just supplement with the Airbnb. And so we got, it was great. We could come up on the weekends that we had free. And when we couldn't come up, we would just throw it on Airbnb. And, it takes work, no doubt about it, but it worked really well. I mean, and help pay for most of the mortgage, most of the expenses to do with the property. And we got, to have a place to stay and bring our friends up to. And now, and we've lived there full time when we moved out of Boston in 2019 in one of the houses. And we actually lived in the other house for some amount of time. So it is kind of the beauty of the short-term rental model, is that it can evolve to what fits your life, at the given moment. And that's changed a lot over the years. You could be a lot more serious about it and, probably make a little bit more money. It just depends, what you need in that time. Maybe someday that'll be, we'll try to make it a little bit, of a bigger revenue generator. We don't know. But yeah, it really has evolved, over time.
Yeah, that's great. I guess, what advice would you give to somebody that's nervous about getting into their first short-term rental, like buying and getting started?
Well, I would say, I think something that was important to us that we talked about, because we've thought about buying, if we might want to buy a third one at some point. And part of making the math work is, when we did it in Ludlow, was that the value of homes versus the rental prices that you could get in that town there was I don't know what the ratio, I guess, was very good. You could buy a house for relatively little, certainly to Massachusetts, but you could rent it out certainly during the ski season for a good amount of money. And then also during the summer, you can do that as well. So it's making sure that makes sense for what you're looking to do. If you're just looking for it to be a full-time short-term rental, buying in the right place and taking your time to, develop a brand and, getting the listing all squared away. I think you want to make sure that it's a big investment, but you can do it. And it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of thought up front.
I would say be really realistic about your inputs and outputs. So how much time can you devote to getting this thing up and running? How much financial upfront cost are you willing to put into it? And then being realistic about what you can charge for it. So you can, if it's really about maximizing your income, then you really need to spend a lot of time to make it a really unique property with high-end finishes, to drive up your ratings and your prices. But if you're only willing, or you only have the time to make it kind of an okay listing, that's fine. But make sure that your pricing reflects that, or you're going to have a really hard time in the beginning. And the first few reviews are critical. The Airbnb, I'm sure, like any other business, has an algorithm. So you are going to either show up or not based off of your communication responses and those first few reviews. So I will tell you, in our first couple of Airbnbs in Vermont, our heat broke. It just completely stopped working, and it was the middle of the winter, and we couldn't get anyone to come and fix it for the first few days. The furnace was just busted, and we had to pay those people to leave all of their money back and beg them not to leave us a review, because it would have killed us. And I think in the first, I don't know, maybe the first year, maybe the first 2 years, we would let people know, if you have any constructive feedback for us, please just let us know directly rather than putting it in our Airbnb. Yeah. So those types of things are really important too.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall communication, the more you can humanize the process, again, that, if you're not going to have 30 homes and have a property manager and you're going to try to do this by yourself, that can be a competitive advantage, to try to, make it that human to human contact that a lot of these property managers aren't doing. That's been successful for us. And, people don't want to leave bad reviews for people that they, kind of know and have talked to, and you're just more likely to get a good experience. And it's also, they will give you that feedback that you do need. And you're always going to be, even this year, a bunch of times there was like a couple things that people say, oh, but what have you thought of this? And yeah, that's a great idea. We'll take that, and we'll, get that one thing that might make someone a little bit more comfortable next time. So always improving. But yeah, I mean, it's been great for us. I mean, it's been a really good side hustle for us.
We've also met some really great people.
Yeah.
Some really nice people. I remember one person in Boston. I chatted with her a bunch beforehand about recommendations because we both are from Ludlow, so we have recommendations for there. We were living in Boston, and this woman and I had such a great relationship that she knit me wine, like it was like crocheted wine covers, like that you put wine in, like to travel with it. And she made a bunch of those for us and left it with a note, like as a thank you. So you meet some really cool people too.
That's awesome. I with the heat going out, I imagine you guys have all sorts of stories. I guess not to dive into stories. I don't I don't know that we need to get too into that, but what are the biggest cons of owning a short-term rental, or in this case, two short-term rentals?
The biggest cons, I mean, I think there's some that can be removed from just having like that property manager. That is where it comes in handy when you get the New Year's Eve text message at 10 o'clock that I think it was like the power was out. And anytime you get anytime you have a guest in the house, silence is what you're looking for. And like, so when you start getting the messages coming in, that can be stressful. And if you have to deal with something, things can break and things can, go wrong, and that's going to happen. And so that is the biggest pain is, the inconvenience of having to be the one, being a landlord. I mean, it's the same thing that you would run into if you were doing a long-term rental. It isn't nothing. It is a time commitment. It just has to be worth it for you. And typically it is.
Yeah, maybe just trying to anticipate if there are things that could potentially go wrong, what you can actually control. So like, for example, with the heat thing, I wouldn't say we did this entirely for this reason, but at one of the houses, the one that had the furnace issue, we also have solar now. And so there's an alternative heat source. And that for us, being in Vermont, is super helpful. Or having a generator or something like that, so that in a pinch, you can make it work, even though there still might be a more of a solution, an involved solution that needs to happen as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing out of curiosity for me is, how much do you feel like or I guess I'll just leave it a little more simple. What is key to getting a 5-star review?
I think it's the first thing is managing the expectations via your listing. So, being transparent, providing good pictures. My God, if you just as being we're also frequent travelers on Airbnb. I mean, if that's a great way to try to figure out like what you would want is by traveling on your own and seeing what you like and dislike about people's Airbnbs. But yeah, having good photos that accurately describe or show the home is super important. There's a lot of listings that don't just have that one simple piece. But yeah, managing expectations via the listing up front. Good communication is a big one. Making sure the house is clean. I mean, that's actually clean, not just kind of put away, but making sure a good job is done with that. Having, I don't know, I think doing some of the smaller things as well. Smaller things like, I don't know, we have power strips so that you can plug in your phone everywhere, and we try to like overdo it with that, trying to have gifts occasionally. We'll put out, we've been better at that and worse at that from in the past, but
I think you guys had some popcorn out for us when we showed up to your place, like some local,
we usually try to have
local
something.
popcorn that was like pretty cool. It was fun.
Yeah, I think stay at your Airbnb like you're a guest, right? What are the things that make life easy for you? Is there somewhere to put your stuff? So like we realized actually, maybe through getting feedback, that in one of the rooms at one of the houses, there wasn't a closet. And so we thought, oh, well, there's a dresser, but maybe sometimes you need to hang up things in your closet. So kind of stay at your Airbnb, and then you can give yourself some critical feedback. And that's why I think it's really important that it is something that you use, or that at least you furnish like you would live in it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, my last question for you guys We only have a few more minutes, but what is something you wish you knew when you got started?
That you should not allow one night stays on Airbnb. They are going to have a party.
Yeah, that sounds like there's a lot more to that.
Yeah, I guess it's just not to get discouraged by, I mean, you are going to have some, bad guests, and that isn't necessarily your fault as much as you want to, there's a lot of settings, there's a lot of things to know. You're not going to know everything right off. And, you're going to make some mistakes. And, if you have one bad guest, we literally, what she's alluding to, we had a, really bad guest, our first guest ever at our own home, way back when. And we almost thought about not doing it at all ever again after that. And I'm very glad that we, overcame that. And, that now I've been doing it for years. We've gotten a lot better at it over time. So, it's managing your own expectations about, you're not going to be a millionaire right off the bat, but over time it can provide, really nice additional income, and like Amy said, meet some great people. And yeah, we've had, it's been a really good experience for us, but there are some times that are a little discouraging for sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Any good ski plans for this winter?
Tough with the 15-month-old, but we did strategically put daycare on the way to Sugarbush. So we do plan to use that a little bit more this year.
Yeah, no ski vacations this year. We're taking this year off, but
we did our first international travel with the little one, and that pretty much halted any travel plans in the immediate future.
You're like, okay, we'll wait a little bit.
Yeah.
Dang, well, I just bought myself a new pair of skis for this season, which I haven't had a new pair in a while. So I'm very excited about this ski season myself. But
nice.
Awesome.
You guys, thank you so much for one, being excellent hosts, and two, coming on and just answering some questions. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, you guys, I hope you found today's video super helpful. Thank you for listening and watching. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thank you.